All right, the hour being 10:01, why don't we call to order this meeting of the California Housing Financing Agency Board of Directors. Roll call, please.
Sure. Ms. Avila Frias. Mr. Schaefer for Treasurer Chung.
Schaefer's here.
Ms. Gallagher. Dr. Imbasiani. Mr. Hunter. Ms. Johnson Hall. I'm here. Mr. Metcalf. Mr. Prince.
Here.
Ms. Hoffman for Secretary Podesta.
Here.
Ms. Sotelo.
Present.
Mr. Russell.
Present.
Mr. Gunning.
Here.
Mr. Alex. Ms. Onodera for Mr. Cohen.
Here for Keely Bosler.
Ms. Patterson.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
Good. I was a little worried there for a second. Okay.
And just, Mr. Chairman, I unfortunately have to leave by 11:30. I have a meeting with my mayor that I have to get back down to. So if there's action items, if there needs to be any changing of the agenda, I'd just love for that to happen. Just
Yeah,
to know
you're
that
not alone. I think we have another board member that also has to leave. So
Oh, perfect.
Perhaps we can take up item 6 before we do the items 4 and 5, which are the presentations.
And it also means I'll ask fewer questions just to make sure we get done. And fewer bad jokes.
Wait.
Fewer bad jokes.
Right?
You gotta set up those meetings well.
Okay, we read my mind. Okay, well then let's go ahead and do approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look through them? Any comments, edits, criticisms?
I'll move
Mr.
approval.
Russell?
And I second.
It's been moved and approved. Can we do that accepted by acclamation? Thank you. We'll do that. Okay, then with that, before we do that, I don't know, Tia, I do want to acknowledge the wonderful news about the election of Tia to the president of the board of the National Council of State Housing Agencies. Round of applause. And I must add that for those of, Jonathan's not here, but we've always wanted the executive director to be more active at the national level, and here we have accomplished it. So thank you very much. That's awesome and well for the agency.
And at the board level too, with the National Council of State Housing board members, we do have our own Tina, who is vice president of the board. So we really have elevated the profile of California amongst the national level of housing finance agencies, so it's very exciting to have that happen, so thank you.
And Mr. Carson reached out and gave his personal thanks, I assume?
But I did hear from Mr. Montgomery,
Okay.
the FHA commissioner. And have had a meeting with Mr. Montgomery, with the FHA commissioner, while we were at the annual conference. And so that was a very productive meeting with the FHA commissioner.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, I was able to attend very briefly, and there was a meeting between large housing authorities and housing finance agencies to have conversations around the project-based contract administration. So that was a great thing to participate in. But I just want to echo what I just heard you say, which is among my peers, and I have other friends who are on boards of state finance agencies in Washington and Colorado specifically, and there is a lot of buzz around the strength of what CalHFA is bringing to the table. So I just wanted to affirm and second what you're talking about we have 10% of the population, right, in California, so to have our CalHFA director being president is really going to, I think, help us dramatically over the next few years, so thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And congratulations.
Do you want to have any comments, or you want to go right to the item?
We can go right to the item since we are under short time, but I do, Mr. Metcalf is arriving. The drawbridge was up, so I did receive a little text, so, yay, Mr. Metcalf.
Okay, now we have a quorum.
Excuse me, Chair Gunning. I just wanted to mention that I don't believe that staff are here yet, so I've texted them and messaged them to get over here as quickly as possible, but I do believe that
stuck behind the bridge as well.
yeah, I think there was some trouble on the bridge earlier, and it may still be continuing. We have Rose McCullough, who's here and present and can proceed with item 4. But items 6, the presenters are not here.
Would you like to go ahead and start with item 4 then?
I think we should,
sir?
yes.
Okay, Rose, if you could go ahead and come up. And just to, as a way of background, the board had asked about the condition of our portfolio and the assets of our portfolio. And we have, over the last several months, reviewed our multifamily portfolio and put into what we think is a good report to provide you with, so that you can have information on the actual portfolio. And so Rose has done a phenomenal job working with staff. So she's going to provide that high-level overview of that report back for the portfolio that you all had asked about.
Morning.
There, good morning. Rose McCullough, risk manager for the agency and also interim over the asset management program right now. So I'm here to present the asset management portfolio report for the first time to the board. And this will be an ongoing report that you will see periodically in your board materials. The report presents a snapshot of our existing portfolio, and this one is dated as of September 30th, 2018. Thank you. And it serves as a management and strategic report planning and strategic planning tool. It's going to assist management and our senior executives with trending and getting ahead of any risks that come our way in our portfolio when appropriate. It breaks down the types of projects we have. It provides risk indicators such as the number of delinquencies, which is very low. Those projects that we have on a watch list, not necessarily financial in nature, but a regulatory agreement, they're not timely on improvements to the property and things like that, not necessarily financial in nature. It also lets us know how many loans are coming due within the next 5 years so we can get ahead of it, get in front of it, and how many projects are coming asset management's way so that they can prepare from a workload perspective. The asset management portfolio that CalHFA has currently oversees 600 projects for affordability restrictions and compliance purposes, and we have $1.18 billion in debt financing. This is a breakdown of our various projects. As you can see, it's diverse. We have Section 8 programs, risk share programs that we share with the Federal Reserve. It mitigates our risk. Our 80/20 CalHFA finance program, MHSA and SNP, conduit, and Section 811. Our delinquencies on the portfolio are quite low. We have a total of 3 projects that are currently delinquent, of which only one has CalHFA financed dollars in it for $230,000. The other 2 are RHCP projects that were deferred during the whole loan time and now have come due, and we're working it out with them. They were RHCP projects. So. This map is a visual of where all of our projects are throughout the state. And our largest projects representing is in the Los Angeles County with 133 projects, followed by Alameda County with 51 projects, and then Santa Clara County with 50 projects. So that's about it. You'll be seeing this, however, in a periodic basis. If you have any questions, we're open to that. And I believe that the team is continue to grow on their data management and analytical skills. So we're really being able to data mine our portfolio and get in front of it. We are currently in the process of a portfolio preservation strategy, which is an effort to continue to maintain and extend that affordability for years to come. So I'm open to any questions.
First, just want to compliment you. That's an outstanding form. That's very helpful and very illustrative.
Yeah, thank you also for preparing. It's really helpful to get us
I have a question for you on the, one of the conversations we've had a lot at the board level is the contract renewals and Section 8 vouchers. And I'm curious to where that falls out. You have the Section 8 program is a small percentage, but is the kind of vouchers with renewal contracts that are less than the term of the loans, limited to that, or do they course through the other projects as well?
You're asking what types are coming due?
Yeah, on where there's a heavy subsidy coming in from Section 8 with a voucher term that may not extend to the term of the loan.
We're aware of that, and we're working on
And
it.
I guess my question is, are those just the Section 8 programs? Or
Yeah.
are they in the other categories as well?
There's other ones as
Okay.
well. Mhm.
And any sense of this relative scale of that?
I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of
Yeah.
curious, okay.
Rose, if you would go back to that kind of snapshot that lists all of that one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one. So out of the 82 projects that have Section 8, I think what you're asking are how many of those have loans that have come due, or the Section 8 HAP contract is coming due, but you still have a loan outstanding, and vice versa.
Yep.
Am I correct? Okay. And we do know that we had some projects that we have been in contact with HUD, in which the loan has paid off, but the Section 8 HAP contract has continued, but we hadn't been collecting the admin fee for that for quite some time at a significant cost. And so that's one of the things asset management has been working on, is to get that admin fee administer that HAP contract, because the loan has paid off. Because one of the things that was done early on was, if you had a loan, your admin fee was coming out of your loan monitoring fee. So when the loan paid off and you continue to provide those services, you weren't getting paid for those services. And so that is an issue that we are very much aware of, and we're working on with HUD right now to start getting reimbursed for those costs. And so vice versa, those loans that are ongoing and they need a HAP renewal, what we're seeing is traditional contract administration being switched over to PBCA as those loans are renewed. And so those are issues that we're continuing to work on as well. And so that breakdown, providing that breakdown, is something that we could follow up with you all on as well.
Thank you.
And can you just stop right there real quick? Also, I want to bring to your attention the MHSA Special Need Housing Program, 155 projects. Given the No Place Like Home Proposition 2 passage and the standing up of the No Place Like Home program at HCD, this is a program that we will be winding down, and we've started engaging in conversations with the counties, and you know that the counties had some concern about the timing of that. And so we're continuing to work very closely with the counties, and we're going to work with HCD. But the idea is, to the extent the asset management of the MHSA has significant local funding in it, transferring that asset management back to counties who want to take back on those responsibilities, or to the extent that they may have HCD funding in it, transferring some of those, the asset management of those, to HCD. We're continuing to have those conversations as well.
So that brings a question up. Was it Proposition 2 that had money coming to CalHFA?
No, that's Proposition 1, and that was on the single family side.
And
Down
that
payment
passed too?
assistance. Yes.
And that means how much to us?
$150 million for My Home down payment assistance.
That's good. Mr.
And I
Russell?
think you had one over there, Ben
Yeah.
and Delilah.
So just on that,
Right here.
so just on that point, I just to affirm what Tia said, I think there's a really strong logic for HCD to consider taking over potentially to at least evaluate what it would take to take over some of the asset management of some of those assets, particularly where HCD already has a loan on those properties and CalHFA does not have the first. So I think that's an area of interest to us, and we're going to be doing some analysis over the next few months to think about mechanically what would that look like and would the counties be interested and so on and so forth. So on the presentation itself, Thank you. I thought I actually liked the other spreadsheet chart, even more data on it. I thought that was very helpful.
Yeah.
And I just wanted, for the benefit of the board, just to say, I think we're actually doing two things here, and we should be intentional about that. One is we're really trying to understand the financial risk to CalHFA in terms of what are the assets that poise, delinquency, default. And then a second, and there's some overlap, but they're distinct in the Venn diagram, would be just preservation risk. What are the assets where we run a risk that we will lose that as part of the state's inventory of affordable housing? On the former, I think the thing that I find a little confusing on this chart, and maybe you can finesse this a little bit in terms of how you present the data, we know there are 3 delinquent properties. And then the next question becomes, how many more properties are there in CalHFA's inventory which are at risk of going into delinquency? And you would often, your watch list would be how you would describe that. Right. But what's a little confusing to me is that we also have the properties with vacancies over 10%, which actually is a larger UPB. And so there's some properties that are, I guess what's odd to me is we have some properties that are running a very high level of vacancy but aren't hitting that watch list. And you have, and then you also have, right, exactly. You have various factors that may be contributing to the watch list, but you're not being clear. So maybe we don't care if you have a project with debt service coverage rate less than 1 because there's so many mitigating factors. So maybe actually you're presenting too much data here, and you should just keep it simple. Like, what are the ones that are currently delinquent? What are the ones that are at risk? And then maybe noting separately as a asterisk kind of to explain what the other oddities are. On the preservation side, similarly, I think you could actually maybe simplify this a little bit by looking at the CHPC at-risk definition. They've done a lot of work in terms of thinking about, like, what are the assets that really are most likely to leave the portfolio? And I think they use the 5-year expiration window, but they further cabinet to, for example, those properties where they're currently operating at rents that are restricted well below market, where it's owned by a for-profit or a very small-scale nonprofit, or where there's a previous record of an opt-out. So you might just look at their definition and see if just for consistency's sake, we can all use that same universe to think about where the real risk is, because there's a lot of really good work on that and sort of back-tested it and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Mr. Russell.
Thank you. First off, I want to add my compliments for the snapshot here. I think this is very helpful for us to be able to look at the data and really get a sense of the scale of the portfolio. I think the comments on the expiring that I was going to make have all been made. It is really a critical issue. I'm curious what the one property with tenant issues, how do you define tenant issues?
If there's tenants that are complaining about, maybe they don't feel that they are being responded to in a timely basis. This is actually a project in Santa Monica called Bernard Park, and there's a tenant organization that has come together and, and just really holding that management team accountable. And so we're watching it and, making sure that it's being addressed.
So is there a threshold when you say tenant issues? I mean, was it something legal filed? Was there demands presented in the letter? I mean, it's a very broad.
It became.
Or a judgment call.
Yeah, no, it's different factors. This one was elevated in the sense that they reached out to the congressman in the area, and so we are tracking it closely. Make sure
and then
addressed.
The area where we have vacancies over 10%, can you characterize those as common factors?
Yeah, most of them are really small projects where, let's say there's 5 units, and so if one comes due, it throws the vacancy rate up over that threshold. So it's most of them are small projects.
And then with SNHP, with special needs, so are we proposing then these items that are in our portfolio now, are we proposing to transfer those?
Potentially.
Okay, because it's a much larger part of the portfolio than I was aware of. And so it continues to raise the questions we've been discussing about what is the appropriate role for CalHFA in special needs, because it isn't just the asset management folks are after, it is in fact the services that this agency is lauded for providing is something they don't get in every part of the public sector. So I think it's important that we not back away from a high level of service provided to some of these providers as we make changes to that program. So those are my my comments.
And I also wanted just to mention on the 27 projects with the debt service coverage ratio less than 1, many of them were, it was from their last audit, so it's a 1 year. They might have had a one-time expense that put them past that threshold, but most of them are one-time in nature. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. That, and then some that are always below that 1.0, they have subsidy that comes in and assists. So.
Delilah, Jim.
So first of all, Ruth, thank you very much for the report. I think we've been asking for this in one way or the other for a bit, and to have it all in one place and have it expressed so well in a matrix, I think is really important. I certainly agree with Mr. Metcalf in terms of some of the improvements that could be made to the chart, particularly how how some of these risk factors overlap, right? One creates the other as opposed to them standing alone. And when you look at vacancy rate, I think it's important not to just look at it from a one-time perspective, but if you have a quarter of a quarter, consistency around vacancy, not just a snapshot. So the two things I would ask maybe the team to take a look at is, I think it's important to capture the information about whether we have nonprofit sponsors or for-profit sponsors. All these really sit in a limited partnership activity, so that's for profit. But if the nonprofit is a sponsor, I would just be curious to see if you have that data point or that data information. And then, do you have a sense of how many units this actually represents?
As far as the entire portfolio?
Right, the total
yes.
number of units, as opposed to just the 600 loans itself.
Oh, on the first page of the report, on the agenda item, it states we have
17,490.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Great, so I think that is, that's clearly significant, and, if you present this again on a quarterly basis, it would be nice just to have that number of units placed on the matrix. And as HCD potentially absorbs some of those units, we can get a sense of what that looks like. But overall, this, to me, this becomes the framework under which we can really direct programmatic improvements under multifamily, and where we're going to head, in terms of our preservation activities. There are significant loans that, 49 properties that are going to lose their regulatory requirements within 5 years. And it'd be nice to have a proactive approach, or maybe a proactive program that kind of addresses how we can keep those in the portfolio and extend our, refinance the debt and extend the regulatory agreement a little bit further. But thank you very much for this. I really, Tia and Ruth, I really appreciate it.
I did want to mention that none of our projects are directly affected by the fires. There's 5 that are in that area, but they have not been destroyed. So.
Yeah.
With all the recent fires, I wasn't clear if any of these incidents were as a result of force majeure items that were outside of the developer's control. I also want to just echo what Ben Metcalf said, because it was a little difficult for me to read. I didn't know if it was additive or a subset of certain things. I wasn't sure. But I will say this. From a conventional standard, these numbers are pretty phenomenal. And there's a lot of valuable information here. I think when people tend to look at these projects, they tend to be the ones that folks want to run away from, because they think that they're hard to manage. But depending upon the lens of this, this tells a very compelling story about why we are involved with these projects, and that they're not as hard to manage as people might think. But again, and that's a valuable story to tell, not just to ourselves, but to the community at large. So I just wanted to share that as something, but I do want to make sure that the numbers, that we're able to understand the numbers, because I wasn't clear if it was a less than 1% problem, or if you add everything together, it was something different. It told a different story, because I wasn't clear. Does that make sense?
Feedback.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Tim?
I would also like to, I think most of my questions have been answered, so I'll be mercifully brief, but I just want to this report that you have up on the screen right now is immensely helpful. And I want to compliment you on that. I have one tiny, tiny little suggestion, because for those of us who have reached a certain age, if you would simply title this Quarterly Asset Management Report, then I won't go looking for the October 31st. But thank you, this is very well done, I appreciate it.
Well said. All right. Eileen?
It just, you answered the question I had on the specific question I had on the wildfires, but I guess I threw out there maybe a macro question of sort of, the headline risks and some of the work that Mr. Schaefer's been doing with the climate bond initiative and stuff, like, where the future holds for us and this exposure to wildfires and things like that. And, how should we be thinking about that in terms of our portfolio and exposure? And I don't know what the response, if lessons learned from Santa Rosa come into play now, if we had any projects that were at risk, of how we address it. But I think that's something that we should be thinking about long-term. Yeah.
Got a follow-up, Tim?
And as you consider that, I'm just wondering aloud, because I'm not the expert in financing this, but to follow up Ms. Gallagher's question, we hear about, for example, this tragic fire in the Camp Fire up in Paradise, and it describes the urban wildfire interface, I believe is the term of art that's used there. Not that there's such a thing as a term of art in a fire like this, but and so I'm wondering whether or not the portfolio components have a clear sight line on projects that may be susceptible or vulnerable to that urban wildfire interface in terms of geography. Is there a GIS system that somebody's consulting to determine that? That's more an informational question than anything else, and I think it's complementary to what Ms. Gallagher is asking.
Like a task.
I've written it down.
Okay.
Is any more questions? Because I have a couple of follow-ups.
Go ahead.
Regarding the vacancy rates, we know that this is kind of a snapshot, one time, and so we know that needs to be worked on. It is the smaller projects, and more specifically, it's some of the MHSA and special needs housing. And that is because the tenant selection process and the process that has to go through creates some issues that probably need to be worked out between the CEC's coordinated entry systems and some of those issues, but the majority of that vacancy rate is coming from the special needs housing program. The watch list, defining tenant issues, what factors go into the watch list. The way we've structured this initially is this is an internal management tool, because I have never had a place where it could be all in one place. And so it is too much information, and staff had kept saying, we're not ready to go to the board, but I pushed them to come to the board because I know that several board members have asked for something like this. So this is a work in progress, and I want to acknowledge staff that we know that there are still issues, and so we appreciate the board's comments, because we will continue to work on that. And we won't be presenting this in such detailed information. This is just the first time that we've done it, so we wanted to give you what we all had, but we will modify this, because what you're seeing now is an internal management tool, so that this is more information that is more beneficial for you at the board level. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so those were my comments on that.
Thank you, Tia.
Thank you so much, Rose. Excellent job.
Yes,
Thank you.
Well done. All right, why don't we jump ahead and move down to item number 6 and the first presentation on Sequoia Knolls. Bledsoe, are you kicking this off?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much for your patience. Can you hear me?
It was on.
You had it on. There you go.
Green.
Okay.
Press it.
It's off again.
Press it. Good.
We're good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, Frank.
I was saying thank you for your patience. Some of us were caught when the drawbridge raising, and we appreciate your patience and your time. Sequoia Knolls is a project that we brought to you for approval in September, and it was approved at that time. But since then, there is a dispute with the developer that came about as a result of trying to close the loan over the length of the regulatory agreement. Now, what we saw was that in the documents, there were references to a 40-year regulatory agreement, which is in conflict with our stated policy for refinancings. We went back and listened to the tape of the board meeting to find out if there was any mention of a 40-year regulatory term, and there was. So we figured we needed to come back to the board with this project, correct the statement about the regulatory length and term, and get your approval again. And Mr. Lyerly will describe the actual circumstances of this deal.
I thought you did very well, Larry. Yeah, the deal was approved on September 13th by the board. It's one of the last two projects we put into our risk share FFB portfolio. It's a strict refinancing of a property that's in our portfolio. Currently has about 15 years remaining on its regulatory agreement. And in our refinancing, and I've heard some discussion earlier this morning about preservation policies and stuff. Part of that is to get a minimum of 5 years additional regulatory term, but not less than 20. The 20-year term does not mean that will be the term. The term stays on the property for the entire length of the loan. And we are well down the line where we expect to close this loan pending your approval before the end of this month. I'll take any questions.
If I could clarify, Mr.
Go.
Chair,
Yep.
this is literally had said it was a 40-year term, and it is not a 40-year term. It is a 20-year term. There is 15, and this is not a refi. This is the acquisition of a preservation loan, of a portfolio loan. And so I think that's where some of the confusion came in. You had a portfolio loan in which the existing owner wanted to get out of the affordable housing business. They were selling the property. And in order to keep the loan in our portfolio, we worked with the new buyer and put them in the new FFB slot. That buyer was willing to come in and buy and use our financing with a 20-year regulatory agreement, not an additional 40-year regulatory agreement. So the only thing this does is clarifies that it's a 20-year regulatory agreement, not a 40-year regulatory agreement. So the minimum is 20 years or the length of the loan, which could be 40 years. And so that's the simplest way to explain what's going on.
Questions?
I move approval of the project.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. Gallagher?
Aye.
Dr. Imbasciani?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson Hall? Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Yes.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
And we have resolution 1827 approved.
Thank you very much.
Next, Plaza del Sol.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Plaza del Sol is a 80-unit senior housing project located in San Jose. Ruth Vakili is here as the senior loan officer to present this project.
Good morning. Okay, I'm closer to the microphone naturally, so I think you can probably hear me okay. Good. Plaza del Sol is a portfolio refinance under the FFB program. It's an 80-unit senior housing project in the Blossom Valley area of San Jose. It's located right across the street from major retail and a mile down from a major mall. Great shopping in a commercial and residential area that's close to the light rail station and a bus stop right in front of the project, so it's ideally located. It is a 2-story building. It has 79 one-bedroom units. They average 547 square feet, and 1 manager's unit that is a 2-bedroom. The project also has a laundry room, 2 laundry rooms, a community room with a full kitchen, office space, and an elevator. It was built in 1997 and since has been kept in extremely good shape. A fiscal needs report called out just very minor repairs, and those repairs have been completed. And I can say that just as a personal statement, I inspected the property with our construction inspector, and both she and I found that this was one of the projects out of many that I've gone through that really has no physical impairments that we could pick out and try and nitpick and say you need to fix this. That said, over time there will be some repairs that need to take place. Over 7 to 10 years, there will be new exterior painting and a new roof installed. So we have required deposit of a replacement reserve of $215,000. And then annually, there's $26,400 that will be deposited to the replacement reserve, which would pay for major repairs that will need to be done over time. The project is affordable 100%. The AMI levels are 50s and 60%. In San Jose, which is a very strong market, there's very high demand for senior housing, especially in the Blossom Valley area. Occupancy levels for senior affordable housing are 100%, and the appraisal did find a few comparables in San Jose, which all were 100% occupied with long waiting lists for senior housing. So this extending, through the refinance, extending the affordability of this project is highly important. This project itself has a waiting list of 25 tenants, and market rates in this area are $2,100 for a 1-bedroom unit. And so the project's rents are between 58 to 70% below market rents, which is substantial. We're requesting a permanent refinance loan of $11,200,000, and the term of the loan is for 40 years. This will be under the FFB program, and we are in a position to close the permanent loan before the end of the year. We were estimating at the time that we went to a senior loan an interest rate of about 5.08%, and that is based on the 10-year Treasury plus 210 over. At that time, the debt coverage ratio was 115. The interest rate has increased a little bit, but we are still underwriting at a 115 debt coverage ratio. And being that we're going to close before the end of the year, we're confident that the rate will hold. This refinance pays off the CalHFA existing loan of $3.8 million. There's also a yield maintenance fee of $215,000. And the refinance also pays off the City of San Jose loan. That's $1.5 million. The City of San Jose will agree to resubordinate, and they will extend their affordability restrictions for 10 additional years as a part of the agreement to resubordinate to our new loan. The refinance will also generate about $5.4 million in cash equity to the developer who will take this money and invest in other affordable opportunities in the Bay Area is JSM Enterprises. They have 4 projects currently in our portfolio and have been a very good developer, very active in San Jose and Bay Area. So hopefully we'll be able to hear and maybe finance the next project from JSM. The refinance, as I had said, also extends the affordability of the property. And one thing that was notable is that the loan-to-value, or one of the things that's notable, there are several, but the loan-to-value is only 47%, so our risk is fairly low. There's also 39 tenants in the project right now who are have tenant-based Section 8 vouchers, and that income over and above tax credit rents is not something that we use in our underwriting, but it is something that generates additional income, which also really reduces the risk, and it adds additional income to the property that the developer can use to fund improvements over time as well. The borrower is Blossom Hill Associates, and the developer is JSM Enterprises. The property manager is California Real Estate Management, who also is doing all the management of JSM's projects and has been managing real estate and affordable housing since 1981. And with that, I'll take any questions.
As perhaps just for my education, but I noticed that the management fee is 5.85%, and it's easy to see because you've highlighted it in green in the documents you provided us. Compared to 4.15 for Sequoia Knolls, can you talk a little bit about why? Is it the scale of project? Is it nature of project? Why would there be such a differential?
Well, first of all, the highlight should have been removed, but I'll do that next time. It wasn't a flashing light on purpose. But for our underwriting purposes, we usually target a maximum of 6 to 6.25% for management fees. For a larger project like this, there also are services that the tenants can avail themselves of. So being that this is more intensely managed and a somewhat larger project, it would be normal to have a range along the higher side of the management fee calculation.
Okay, so it sounds like Sequoia Knolls is extraordinarily low, is at 4.15.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And sometimes, my experience has been that either the developer is keeping the rate a little bit lower and sometimes take an asset management fee below the line. There can be multiple ways of doing it.
Okay, and we're typically.
If you allow me to assist a little,
I'm happy.
Sequoia Knolls is only 20% affordable. It does not have a bond regulatory agreement tied to it right now and things like that. It's also in Fresno as compared to San Jose, and so there's quite a spread in costs between the valley and the coast. So there could be a lot of different factors, but those would be immediately that would come to my mind and why that number would seem out of scale. But they're really in 2 different parts of the state that distinctly different costs associated with.
Okay. Thank you. So along the same line, so 3.5 seems to be a general, when you're underwriting growth of expenses, 3.5% was the same in both markets, and is that a standard you're using right now?
That's our standard, and when we have a deviation from the standard, then we typically note it in our write-up. It's the increase in income of 2.5, increase in expenses of 3.5. Property taxes are 1.25%, but for the most part, other expenses are 3.5, which we found to be very typical.
Okay. Well, those are from my education. I appreciate it, and I'm prepared to move the item as well.
Could I have one question?
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. It's great to see that we're refinancing this asset to put it on a better track for the long term, extending the regulatory use agreement. But we're also doing a couple other things which I wanted to unpack a little bit briefly. One is paying off the city of San Jose loan, which kind of puts more money back into their coffers that they can redeploy. And yet, we have done that while the city is actually extending their use agreement, which further restricts some units. And I would love to just understand, like, how did that happen? Was that a condition of the refinance that we imposed, or was that voluntary on the part of the developer or requirement of the city? And then second of all, I see we're taking some cash out of the asset, equity out of the asset, which is great, unlocking some potential there to redeploy into other housing. No concerns with that, but there's a representation made here that those funds will be used for other affordable housing purposes, and I'm just curious, did the developer sort of voluntarily sort of represent that, or agree to commit to tracking those funds, or is there any follow-through on how those dollars get used?
In regard to the use of funds, the developer is an affordable housing developer and manager, and so their intention is to continue along that business line. So when I asked what the use was, because I knew that would be a question that came up, that was the response, is that their intention is to invest in other affordable projects. I don't know if they've identified any yet.
Right, okay.
But it's a very hot market, so it's hopeful that they will continue to find something fairly soon, and hopeful that we can finance it. My experience with the city of San Jose, to answer that question, is that they will, as a agreement to resubordinate, they'll usually want something in terms of additional affordability. They want to continue to monitor.
So I guess the regulatory agreement was structured to survive the payoff of their loan.
Yes.
That's the bottom line.
Yes, it
so they had
is.
some leverage on this. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I didn't understand what they were subordinating to if their loan was being paid off. I always like hearing from the developer, but I know we have a time crunch. I just wanted to know if they're here and, if they'll come up and just kind of just tell us a little bit about their pipeline intentions around the 5.5 million, if they have any leads or
Certainly.
potential
Alexis
projects.
Grant is representing JSM. And Alexis, would you mind coming up?
It's always just nice to see, borrowers.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Did you
Okay,
hear
want me to
that
share?
question? I think she's just asking if your intentions with the equity that's been pulled out the project, if you have any projects identified or just some thoughts or any general comments about the project you'd want to share with the board?
We have no projects that we have identified. We are looking all over the Bay Area, not as much in San Jose because they're very difficult, but we are looking and we'll continue to look because we're not done building affordable.
Great. So maybe, I guess, just for the record, identify who you are, sorry.
I'm sorry?
For the record, just identify who you are.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Alexis Grant, Vice President, JSM Enterprises.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I do have a comment. I think Ruth mentioned the resubordination of the existing regulatory agreement.
Yes.
But them getting paid off. This is an issue that we are dealing with from a public policy standpoint, and I wanted to make sure I brought it to the attention of the board. Several of our jurisdictions either have funding in a particular deal that they're trying to preserve, or a new deal that's coming on and they're bringing their local dollars to the table. And when CalHFA has been a lender and in a first lien position, we have required that our lending continue to be in first position. What we're finding is that local governments are pushing back on their regulatory agreement and their affordability being in front of CalHFA's financing. We find that in particular in San Jose. I think from a policy standpoint, for 40 years, we have required that our lien be in first position. However, as a lender with a purpose, and our purpose to promote affordability, from a policy perspective, if you no longer look at those affordability restrictions as a lien, but you look at them as a land use and regulation of the land for affordability purposes, we are becoming more and more comfortable with those affordabilities being in front of our first lien loan, especially when we're underwriting to those affordability levels. And so that is a shift from a policy perspective in CalHFA's culture, but it is a shift that's the path we will be taking. And so we want to make sure that the board knows of that. But what we have found out that it has been very difficult and staff and resource intensive to negotiate this on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. And so what I have instructed staff that I would like to do is we need to come up with a form or a youth agreement that is basically a stripped down just affordability restriction. Doesn't include all of the local government's monitoring and all of the extra things that you would see in some of their regulatory agreement, because putting that in front of our lien would continue to have additional risks that we can't be responsible for. But the basic affordability levels and preserving those affordability in case of default or foreclosure is very important to the local jurisdictions. And it is something that we would support as well. In the history of CalHFA, there have been very few foreclosures. I think there's maybe been one that I have been able to find out about in the 40-year history. And so, but it has been very staff intensive. And so the goal is to create a template that could basically be used statewide so that we don't have to keep negotiating this over and over and over again. And so that we have found San Jose to be particularly difficult. Let me just put it out there. And so, yes, so we were working with our borrowers, and hopefully we can help them move things along in the city of San Jose.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Tim.
Since I tend to be inclined to speak up on matters like this to get some of this into management's hands, I would support that kind of approach so long as I could be made comfortable that indeed there was a deed restriction. I think a simpler deed restriction is generally better than a complex deed restriction. If it goes on as a deed restriction, runs with the land, I can see myself as one board member only becoming comfortable with that approach to avoid the very problem that the executive director is talking about.
Other comments? Yes.
And just to echo that, from a policy perspective, I think that is the correct policy and the correct policy shift that CalHFA, as a public sector, private, forward thinker, needs to do. I would just, not to put out there some legal advice, but maybe just take it not as a different regulatory agreement, but just as a subordination agreement, that you subordinate everything but the deed restrictions. And that's the agreement that you're executing.
We've tried that.
Oh, they haven't tried that.
And the city, and that didn't really work out because the city, here's the issue. Several of the local jurisdictions are coming with their own money. And in their actual ordinances, it prohibits them from subordinating.
Subordinating, okay.
I mean, I just got to put it out there.
Yeah.
They're like, and so it is a new dynamic that we're facing because they're coming in with subordinate debt but don't want to be subordinate.
Right.
And so it's interesting.
Right.
And so we have tried different approaches. We've tried, here's a subordination agreement. We're going to subordinate everything but your affordability. And that hasn't worked for them.
Wow.
And so a use agreement that would stay in first position seems to be a mechanism, or a deed restriction, a mechanism that maybe they can get comfortable with, because each of their local ordinances are going to be different. But what we are finding is that they're bringing in significant money, and they are like, we do not want these affordability restrictions to go, which I completely understand. But I can't have your 24-hour security services buried into an obligation and then I'm going to continue to try, and it's in a workout position. It doesn't make any sense. And so trying to find that balance. And when I say it has been staff intensive, I It's an understatement. Yes, yes.
This is great. So HCD, just for the benefit of the board and for Tia, she knows, and her team, HCD has also started walking down the same path. We're on the other side. We are a subordinate lender. We're very keen to make sure our rights are maintained. But we've run into, in our conversations with many other first lenders and so on and so forth, the reality that we can't have our full regulatory agreement priming their note. So we have and now are breaking up and having a pretty simple use agreement with just the affordability components. That is a standalone regulatory agreement that is first to all the other liens, and then essentially a second sort of lien agreement / regulatory agreement that gets at some of the fuzzier stuff, where we have service requirements or special needs populations or GHG reduction elements. Those are below. So. It's complicated. I think it's where the world is going, and I think if certainly I think CalHFA, some $5 billion that AC is looking at putting out over the next few years with Prop 1 and Prop 2, I think would like to go down that path and would like to make sure that we're also working well and doing something that's consistent with what the other cities are doing as you guys are looking, CalHFA is looking to finance these loans.
I just had one other comment. The Senate Housing Chair is the senator for this district. Is he aware of this project? If not, we should make him aware that we're doing this.
Actually, I think we have 3 or 4 projects in San Jose we probably need to make the senator aware of.
I have a meeting with him at the end of the month, so that's why I want to
We'll
make
make
sure
we provide those letters to you.
Perfect. Let's do that. Any other comments from the board? I think Mr. Russell was going to move it. So moved. Is there a second? Second. The vote, please, or roll call.
Mr. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. Gallagher?
Aye.
Dr. Bassiani?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Metcalf?
Aye.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Sotelo?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Gunning?
Aye.
Resolution 1828 is approved.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving back to item number 5. Tim, presentation of single-family loan production report.
So I thought that, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the board. I thought I'd start this morning by talking about something that's on top of our mind, how the fires across the state has affected our single-family portfolio. So there are two ways to look at how it affects our single-family portfolio. One is our legacy portfolio, meaning these are loans that we've made that sits on our balance sheet, and the other way to look at it are things that are in our pipeline, meaning that there are reservations that we've taken and the loans haven't closed yet. So with respect to the 3 affected counties, Butte, LA, and Ventura, we have 28 loans. I'm speaking first to the loans in the pipeline. These are loans that are either reserved or locked but not yet purchased by us. In Butte, we have 28 loans. In LA, we have 116 loans. And in Ventura, we have 22 loans. In Butte, we actually do have 4 loans in Paradise. And in Ventura, we do have 1 loan in Camarillo. So our servicer, it's been a busy morning for us. Our servicer just announced this morning, because of the actions that FEMA took yesterday, that they will suspend purchasing loans in those 3 affected counties for 90 days. And once the fires are contained, they'll go about requiring reinspection of the properties. And once the properties are reinspected and exterior are determined to be sound, they will purchase the loans. And one of the things they'll do within those 90 days is that in the homes that are away from the immediately affected areas, they will make exceptions and purchase those loans. Again, they'll demand or require reinspection of properties. And with respect to our legacy portfolio, we do have about 200 loans in Butte, and about 150 loans in Ventura, and an unknown number of loans in LA. When we ran these numbers last week, LA hadn't come up yet. But in large part, most of our loans in LA are not in the areas that have been affected. So let me just pause there. That's sort of something that we've been working on this morning. I know that's something that's on top of everyone's mind. The one other thing I will add is that I will remind the board that we do open our single-family program for non-first-time home buyers who have lost their homes in a major disaster declared by FEMA. So the board approved that exception of the use of our down payment assistance for non-first-time home buyers for families that lost their homes in these major disasters. The board approved that in February. We launched a program in June because it required a lot of systems work. And at this time, there are 3 events that are part of our program. The fires that were declared in October last year, and they included Butte, Lake, Mendocino, Napa, Nevada, Orange, Sonoma, and Yuba. And then the fires that were declared in January, and they included LA, San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And then the one that was declared back in August that affected Shasta. So the ones that are currently, the current fires haven't actually been declared as a major disaster by FEMA yet. They're almost there. They've taken steps to update the fires to include individual assistance. So they're sort of like on their way to declaring this as a major disaster in the weeks to come. So I'll pause there. See if there
Are you saying there's no affordable housing in Malibu and Thousand Oaks?
We have very few loans there, if any.
We're not here to judge.
I was asking a
We'll
question.
do what we can.
Sure. Yes.
Tim, educate me as briefly as you can. I heard a news report that fire and casualty and homeowners insurance can be and potentially will be denied to people who are in burn areas who didn't even lose their homes. Do we have some way to look into the future and determine whether or not we have some risks there?
Don't believe the news.
Well, it's fake news, I understand. But I do want to make sure that this is a diligence question for me, just to make sure that I keep myself informed about potential risks that may loom in the future for us.
So I think that's definitely an issue that we worry about with respect to the legacy loans that we have, because just as a tangent to frame the issue, all the single-family lending that we do now, to the extent there's risk as the ones you describe, that's all being passed on to the GSEs, if you will. In our case, FHA and also Fannie Mae. With respect to the legacy portfolio, which is dwindling quickly, we now have about 8,000 to 9,000 single-family whole loans that we own. They are being serviced by about only 4 servicers now. That is a potential issue if they were to lose their property insurance and they were to burn down. Let's say they can't replace it. We'll have to work with our servicers to see what we can do for those folks. But that's a possible risk, yes.
So in reference to our policy of assisting folks who have been burned out with the home, the loan assistance, do we foresee a swell of applications? Have we historically seen heavy use of that program by that category of individual?
We haven't seen a swell, and I have to admit that we launched this back in June, and we haven't seen a reservation yet. Okay. And there's a lot of we have been involved through the agency on some of the efforts from OES. Families that are affected, it's hard to take immediate action. There's a lot of sorting through on what they want to do, what they need to do, the claim, through the insurance companies. There's just a lot of stuff to sort through. What we're offering is their ability for them to say, if they want to buy another home, either in the affected area or anywhere else in the state, we're willing to step in and provide the down payment assistance and the closing cost assistance. Perhaps the families don't need that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I think that there are folks. They are sort of just. I think I've been to one meeting in which it was said that a lot of people are paralyzed for quite some time before they decide on what they want to do exactly. So we are available to help, but we have actually seen people availing themselves of the program yet.
And how is that marketed? How is that made known to the marketplace that this is available?
We have a group of 3 or 4 staff who are their entire work is to train our lenders on the programs that we have. So we do ask them to tell our lenders, because on a single family side, unlike the multifamily side, we don't actually originate the loans. So we have to educate our lenders so that the lenders know how to make these products available to the end users. So we do the best we can to educate our lenders that these programs are out there, no different than our normal first-time homebuyer programs.
Okay, it just seems like this is an extraordinary set of circumstances over these past years. It may become the new normal. For all we know, we may be in that business quite a bit, but I wonder if there are not ways that we can. It's a question, I'm not going to ask for a response, but that we can be more visible as a source of aid in this case.
I would also add that I think that OES does do outreach over time, and we have produced a couple flyers that the OES hands out at their events. Okay, so on to the main reason why I'm here. So I think that there was several comments made. There have been comments made about that some of the reports we've been showing on the single-family performance has been focused on the legacy loans that we have. And as we talked about, for good, I think it's mostly good that the legacy portfolio in which we do have real estate risk, in which we retain real estate risk, that portfolio is dwindling quickly. At some point, we had 20 or 30,000 of these loans, and now I think it's down to about 8,000 or so. And this particular point is a transition of not focusing on the legacy portfolio and focusing on the new loans that we're producing. So this first slide here is showing our production in terms of reservations over time. So this, there's another chart later on that shows our reservation. So you can see that our reservations are doing extremely well. What I'm showing here is an aspect of our program that we track carefully over time, is how many of our end users, the borrowers, actually use what we call the ZIP program, meaning that how many of them use our closing cost assistance program. Because just about nearly all of our loans come in with the down payment aspect. That's really kind of the thrust of our program. And we're tracking carefully the number of people who are not using the closing cost assistance. And that's happening in large part, if you look at the chart carefully, the no ZIP or the no closing cost loans are sort of these two groups over here. And you can see that before rates kind of gone up in the last 6 months, that group was quite small, and that group has sort of grown as rates have sort of become more elevated in the last 6 months or so. And we also track our top lenders very carefully for a variety of reasons. One is that it's good to know who your sort of friends are. And at the same time, sometimes our lenders, some of them do have their own programs to reach out first-time home buyers, and it's important for us to keep track of what they're doing or sometimes what they're saying. So you can see that some of our all of our top lenders these are really all originators and not banks. And this is a chart that I really like because a lot of times people talk about seasonality, which there is seasonality in single-family lending, and that's why it's important to look at it from a sort of a year-over-year comparison. And you can see that we have done extremely well in the last 6 months. We have had 6 months in a row in which we've taken in about 1,000 loans, more than 1,000 loans in a month. So 1,000 may sound okay, but our average loan size is about 270 to 290. So if you're using 300 as sort of a proxy, that's $300 million in a month. So it's a lot of loans sort of working through the system. And this chart here is a way for us to track our fallout. So although we may take in, let's say, 1,000 loan a month, not all of them pull through. Some of them drop out for a variety of reasons. And roughly speaking, over time, as we've been tracking this more carefully, our pull-through rate is about 85%, or the fallout rate is 1 minus that, which is about 15%. The reason why this chart kind of falls out at the very end like that, what we're showing is that these are months in which the reservations are still quite fresh. They have reserved, and some of them haven't locked yet, some of them have locked, and some of them haven't submitted their files. So over time, what you expect is these two lines to sort of collapse and get close to each other. And as the gap is sort of, the gap between the two lines is representing the fallouts.
Maybe you could just stop it 2 months early instead of giving us that heart attack.
No, it's I struggle with this chart a lot. Yeah, we can figure out something to not give people the heart attack. But what we're trying to do is that we're trying to track fallout. And then on the bottom of this chart here, this is a lot going on here. On the bottom of the chart here, in which you see the orange, what you're seeing is the cancellations. So then an actual cancellation could be what we're seeing quite a bit sometimes nowadays. So like, for example, October was actually an extremely good month in terms of reservations. And sometimes you say, like, why was October a particularly good month? And if you look at the daily data, which I'm not showing here, on days in which rates rise, we get huge number of reservations. And for the nurse speak in us, Fed like to talk about sometimes like bringing forward demand, and there's a little bit of that happening, I think, with us. Although you can't really reserve with us until you are in contract, but there's a little bit of happening where people are sort of scared that rates are going to continue to rise, and then on days that rates rise, there was one day, sometime in October, in which it got 100+ loans in a day. And that's one thing. And the other thing that I think that happens is that right now our program, we haven't actually changed our rates intraday. So there are times in which when we post the rates in the morning, and then the market is, let's say the bond market is actually, let's say, the yields is going up, or it's sort of like prices are going down, we don't change our rates. And then people are expecting rates to be higher the next day. So then they go ahead and lock in a little bit earlier. And again, sort of that whole bringing forward demand issue. So when we see these cancellations on certain months, some of that is coming from this sort of, well, are people locking a little bit earlier than they should? Are people reserving or locking a little bit earlier than they should? But we'll try to deal with the heart attack next time. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I think on this chart, so the orange box say, take March 146. That's the difference between the blue dot in March and the red dot. Is that correct? Is that how that's supposed to be read?
I'm sorry, say one more
So
time.
pick any month. So I picked March of 2018 as 146, right? So that's the difference between the reserved and the securitized for that month?
No, because we do get outright cancellations, and then some of them don't make it through the system for other reasons, not because they canceled. So then this here is the 147 is a big contributor to the gap, but not the only contributor.
To clarify that, they're not reserved and securitized in the same month, there's a stagger, correct?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
so from the time when we see the blue line, all of it to when the securitization, that could be like 90 days. And then they could fall out for other reasons. Like some of them cancel because they say, well, you know, we realize that we're not ready. And some of them fall out because they're not compliant.
And when we're going to report to the board, I scream at them to securitize as fast as possible.
And speaking of securitization, so just so that the board sort of can be sort of in sync with our terminology here. By securitization, we just mean that that's at the moment our program is not driven off bonds anymore. Our program is when we have a loan that we purchase, we sell it into the mortgage market. And the point in which you sell into the mortgage market is the securitization. That's the term that we're using. So what you're seeing here is, what I'm showing the board here is that we look at stuff as they come in, and then to Preston's point, we track the reservations that's coming in. 90 days later, and through that time, about 15 out of 100 loans fall out. 90 days later is when the loan is sold, and the whole financing is complete, if you will. And what you're seeing are charts on the front end, the reservations, and this one here is on the very back end, in which we're doing completing the financing. And in large part, you see similar things as the first chart that you saw, in which we are seeing less of these loans with closing cost assistance. And last but not least is the chart on where we do most of our lending. About 50% of our loans come from 4 counties: Riverside, San Bernardino, Sacramento, and LA. That's it. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Everyone all right? Tim, thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Can I?
Yes.
So I know Board Member Gallagher had requested a new version of reporting, and so I want to make sure this is kind of in the vein that the board members had kind of asked for when it comes to single family, like looking forward and present as opposed to taking a look back.
Yeah, and I think the big change is the old reports were looking at delinquency rates, which became less material.
Yeah.
And to the extent, obviously, if that changed, we want to know, but I think this makes more sense.
Okay.
Where we are.
Excellent.
So I do struggle with what are you wanting us to take from these things? So so the first few charts that had the 7 different lenders, right? It almost could be quarterly versus monthly.
Mm-hmm.
So you can give us the numbers instead of us trying to eyeball the different sizes of Golden versus another, right? I mean, if there was a quarterly, so that gave more space to kind of say, if that's what you want us to know, I just don't know what you're trying to get us to see. That you have a lot of activity with 7 different lenders is great, so maybe that's what you're trying to get us to see and to understand?
It's more of an information for the board, knowing who our biggest partners are. And so I think as a quarterly reporting, that probably does.
Because then you can give us the numbers, right?
Right.
And then I think there's another, and again, that blue line or red line chart of the cancel, I mean, I just think that could be kind of clarified then, because I heard you say, well, there's a lag between reserved and securitized, but I assume that the dot in July is going back and looking at, it was reserved in July, and maybe it's securitized in October, but it's going back and, saying that one in July happened. You're shaking your head no. That would make me think that as you securitize higher in certain months, and you've had, that line should cross every once in a while then. If it's like real time, reserved in June, but securitized in October. So I guess, again, it's just, what are you trying to get us to see? And even on the orange box, the difference between canceled and then there are other reasons why they drop out, what's the purpose of having us see canceled? I mean, I guess that's what I'm just trying to get at.
And so this is, again, a work in progress.
Yeah.
So this is wanting your feedback as to what's the type of information you want to see. And so this is kind of a management reporting internal, how we're keeping track. And so making sure that you all have enough information as a board to know what's going on. And so I think we've probably presented you more information than you actually need. And once again, this was us staff saying, well, we're not really ready because we're still kind of finalizing it, and me telling staff, no, I want the board to be informed.
So I totally appreciate that. So when I looked at that chart, I saw the growing gap between blue and red, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that says to me that there's something happening between the reservations and the securitization.
And
so that's what I went to,
right?
And so is that what you're trying to have us kind of think about? And then are you going to come back and start saying, when we do these reservations, here's how we do you want it closer to 100% reserved to securitize? What's the kind of goal? And so that's what I'm just looking at that chart, just trying to figure out what it is that I should be taking away from that.
You should be taking away that we have about a 15% fallout.
Well,
and that big gap is because of time.
But it also looks like that fallout grew over the course of the year. So what's going on that creates more fallout, and is that something to be concerned about or not?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's a natural market fluctuation. It's not about, it's like the behavior of consumers as opposed to what our staff is doing or programmatically what our program has to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So if maybe, we give you some policy guidelines that we're looking for as a board, then maybe your report can more reflect that. I mean, I think the things that we should care about, and it's no particular order, is do you have enough money to administer such a robust program? And is there anything that we can do from a policy perspective to either understand that hurdle or to help you get more money to do that? The other is inherently, as we go forward in our pipeline, what are the risks associated with the program itself and the types of loans that we're making? If there is a program shift in risk, then we need to understand that. And I think to Ms. Gallagher's point, really looking forward in a pipeline mode was really the point of seeing the report differently. I think the details probably is too much. Can you imagine me saying that? but I think the pipeline and forecasting the pipeline, I think, is important so that we understand, like this chart that's up, knowing that 4 counties produce 50% of our loans. That's an interesting way that San Francisco is not noted anywhere here because it's unaffordable to live in San Francisco.
Right.
So that kind of policy perspective, I think, is helpful.
So, go ahead.
And if I may, I want to just accentuate that to this board member, only this board member. This chart was particularly useful, the one that's up right now. And what I would be interested in seeing is, rolling average, for example, and I'm not trying to micromanage it, but is the fallout rate steady? Is the fallout rate rising? Is it falling? Because that would provoke the question about whether or not there's something going on in the underlying program. So I don't necessarily need to see the ZIP 3% and the ZIP 4% because I won't comprehend it anyhow.
Right.
So,
I agree.
but the fallout rate is what's important, I think, to this board member.
So we are using a lot of down payment assistance because we have a lot of loans. And we were very pleased to see that Proposition 1 pass because we were a little concerned because our single family program is very robust. Our fallout rate is about 15%. And the worst thing that could happen, or the biggest risk that I see, is our down payment assistance running out such that we have to curtail our lending. And that has been the biggest thing, is that once you get your programs up and running, you want them to continue to run. That start and stop kind of thing is very problematic for programs. We've seen some of that on our multifamily side. And so I would have to say that our biggest risk on the single family side literally is running out of down payment assistance money. So one of the things we have worked with internally is what would be the ongoing revenue source for a down payment assistance program. And the interesting thing that they're trying to tell you with the ZIP, or the closing cost assistance, is that's one of the ways in which we make money to fund programs. And so if the interest rates are going up and you see less people using the ZIP program, then that's revenue that you're not bringing in for additional down payment or closing costs. And so all of that was to tell you it's trending. We're doing a lot of loans, and we're doing more and more down payment assistance, and we're using more and more down payment assistance. And one of the biggest risks to the program would be the loss of down payment assistance. And I'll let, if Tim has anything to add to overall trends, I'll let him.
As he's walking up, so that blue line, red line, I think that fallout is a big deal, right? Because if you're spending a bunch of time doing the reservation, but you're not closing, you're spending a bunch of staff time you're not getting paid for, I assume, right?
I'll let Tim speak to that. Go to that.
Right, so you look from April 2018 to, as time goes on, unless you're gonna say that that red line's gonna move up as you get more data, that says to me that there's been a growing amount of, and forget the last 2 months and that heart attack line you gave us. That says one thing. The other thing, I just want, I agree with that last chart as being really powerful. I think that does lead to all kinds of questions. I think Tulare has half the population of Fresno. So it seems to me that that's like a disconnect, that it has a higher number of originations than Fresno, right? In a small way, but I would love to know what's the population. That chart led to a bunch of questions about, what's happening in different communities and what's our role in those different counties. So I love the last one, but this one definitely, I mean, if you leave it to me, I'm gonna ask questions about what's the gap and what's going on in there between the red and the blue.
Well, if the report is the cost conversation, it certainly has. This chart, first of all, this chart does not concern me. It's very common to have fallouts in single-family reservations.
Oh, I believe that, but it's grown over time.
That's a percentage.
So what's happening here is that you made a comment earlier about it crisscrossing. What we're trying to do is, on this chart, we're trying to synchronize the reservation to the securitization. So I think earlier we chose March. So what we're saying is that we reserved 961 loans in March of 2018. Irrespective of when it actually got securitized, we're tallying that number, and we're saying that we're going to draw that dot on the same time and below that 961. So then we're saying that 814 loans have securitized out of that 961. This gap here that may seem like is growing is it's the optics, it looks like, is growing, and it's doing that for two reasons. One is that this gap should narrow over time to close to that 15% fallout rate. The other reason why this is growing is because these months have higher reservations. So 15% of a higher dollar amount is going to show a bigger gap, because this, on the left-hand side here, are numbers. I'm sorry, I've been told that when I move my mouse, you don't see up there. So the left-hand axis are number of loans. So then 15% of a larger number is going to have a bigger number the gap is going to look bigger because we're tracking number of loans. This chart.
So I think that if it's capturing, let's do June of 2018 could have closings that still haven't happened yet, and the June of 18 might still go up a little bit. Then I agree with Tim that maybe that should have a dotted line that says that this month hasn't closed out yet. Because no matter what you say to me, there is a growing gap between red and blue, and it's not just a straight 15%.
Yes, there are more loans that are coming in.
I have to leave, so you get to.
There are more loans that are going to be coming in for some of these let's say, I would say July and maybe just a little bit of June, yes. But this is still 15%. And we don't think that's bad. I think that when you look at a more conventional lender, that fallout rate, it's much closer to like 25 to 30%. This is part of the reason why some of the folks that we work with in our single family program love our program, is that our throughput rate is so consistent, and that's part of the reason why we don't change rates within a day. Like intraday, we don't change rates because the folks that we hire to hedge our interest rate risk, they're so confident that these pull-through rates will be so consistent over time. They just haven't bothered to change rates.
Doctor?
Yeah, I had a question on because I'm thinking that, my agency is involved in a pretty robust single-family home mortgage program lending, and I was new to this world, so at one point a couple of years ago, we invited the outside world to come in and take a look and see how are we doing compared to industry standards. How many people servicing how many loans and originating loans, and it was very gratifying to find out that we met or exceeded industry standards. And I look at that and wonder, have we compared ourselves to the outside world?
It's like something like this, like fallout rate?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yes, the short answer is yes. I mean, I'm not sure what I have to say to impart that this is an extremely low fallout rate.
Okay.
So I did learn something interesting here. I'm not sure I know how to process it. But what I just heard you say using a different set of words is that this isn't seasonally adjusted.
No.
Okay. So then my next question is there a methodology to adjust it for seasonality? I suspect I know the answer to that, but I'm going to ask it anyhow.
Yeah, I guess we can. I'm not. We can think about it. I'm not exactly sure what it gives us in terms. I mean, to Tia's point, part of the reason why we track this. Why do we track this? We track this because it's important that we have higher throughput than low throughput, right? That means that we're not, to Preston's point, that when we work on a loan file, we want it to come and become a real deal. We don't want to work on files in which we have high fallout. And two is that the folks that we're using as our partners, they care about this because it affects their hedging, right? It's easier to hedge an interest rate risk when you know and a reservation will turn into an actual deal closing versus like guessing if it will close or not. And we also track this for operations. How much work is coming through the pipeline, and do we have the staff to do it, or do we need to sort of move things around to do it? So there's a lot of reason to track this, and I'm sorry, it's a lot of details that maybe we won't show this next time.
It helps us.
If I may, to Mr. Pierce's point, maybe, again, tiny little things to this individual board member, simply a legend that it's not seasonally adjusted would be a nice reminder if you want to present it to the board again. And I think the second thing might be, even if it's just a box there to say year-to-date, last period we looked at, the average was, so that there's a benchmark for comparison, and thus when we see these seasonal or noisy increases or decreases in gaps, there's a benchmark for some kind of reassurance. I'm not sure I know what that ought to be, but I'm just thinking aloud with you.
So we attempted to do that. On the upper left-hand corner, you see the average for the last 9 months.
Yeah.
And we didn't average the most recent 3 months because we know those 3 months, the loans haven't come in yet.
Yeah.
So, and we've done this, to your point, that we have been tracking this for, 6 to 9 months now. And the 6 to 9 months prior to these 12 months, we're seeing about the same thing.
That helps, thank you.
The takeaway, we have about a 15% fallout rate. That's the takeaway.
Which I would just like to say, if most lenders are seeing a 25 to 30%.
Yes.
So then I think that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, much higher.
We're exceeding industry standards.
And much higher, in part because a lot of the borrowers are coming to us, they need the down payments assistance. And then whereas if you are looking at a typical lender who are not dealing with, let's say, families that need down payment assistance, they could be shopping a little bit more. They could be changing their mind about whether or not they want to buy or not. It's a tough market out there for affordable homes.
Quick question for you. On one of those charts, you showed the percentage of the no zip going up. I don't know if it's percentage or then maybe just the number. In the bar chart you had early on, you made the point about the no zip loans increasing. So how does that reconcile with the demand for the down payment assistance? That's where.
Oh, I think that said a different way. Gosh, if rates were lower, maybe these numbers would be higher. Like what I'm saying is this: if rates weren't higher, these numbers that you're seeing here in terms of reservation could well be higher, because there could be folks who
getting priced out of the conventional.
Because they cannot avail themselves to the closing cost assistance because it requires a slightly higher rate, and therefore they don't have enough money to close a loan. To Tia's point earlier about the down payment assistance, we are using quite a bit of our down payment assistance every month for these loans. We currently have in our reservations about $20 million of down payment assistance that's already reserved. The money's, we're recycling the money to the tune of about $2.5 to $3 million a month. But we're still using upwards of like $10 to $11 million every month. So, so Prop 1 should be extremely helpful outcome. My guess is that we'll get that towards the end of the first quarter or second quarter next year.
Can you refresh, what's the source of that money now? Is that, besides recycled monies?
So yeah, the CalHFA has administered or has been an administrator of, I believe, 2 or 3 occasions in which the state has passed bond measures for down payment assistance for homeownership. And in 2016, there was a legislation that helped us consolidate all these funds into one place and to be used for one purpose and streamline the process and guidelines, all that stuff. And those were, what you're seeing here really is the sort of the culmination of 2 or 3 years of simplifying our program, streamlining our program, and there were some things that we did through the board, such as simplifying our income limits by county, our income limits. What you're seeing here is a culmination of all those things in the last 2 or 3 years.
And it is all recycled former bond proceeds. Yeah. That there's a limited amount and it's dwindling down.
Got it.
Quick question.
Okay.
Remind me how to qualify as a first-time home buyer. If you've already purchased a home, but it was 3 years ago or 7 years ago, you still qualify?
3 years.
3. Okay.
So then, so that's one of our trickier questions now, is that we now use tax transcripts to determine that you have not deducted mortgage interest in the last 3 years. And as that sort of transitions out, we have to figure out how we're going to determine a first-time home buyer, because people may not be able to do that or may not be incentivized to do that this year because of the tax reform.
Good. Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. I want to draw everyone's attention to the regular reports under item number 7. Is there any other discussion amongst the board? Any issues?
I have a question. I'm looking at page 68. And it looks like we're outperforming on our fee income right now pretty significantly. Can you talk about the components of the fee income?
I think the lion's share of that fee income is coming from the single-family program that Tim just talked about. I think in the body of the memo, we talked that we pulled in about $8.9 million in fee income generated from that loan production itself. The difference comes from the multifamily side of things, as well as the SNP program and the fee income that we pull in on those as well.
So it's nice that our year is starting off so strong, and I have certain concerns that, given where the market is headed, that, I mean, hopefully we're using that conservatively, because I can't see that trending in that direction for the entire year. I sort of get a sense of people rushing the store.
Bringing it forward.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Steve. Okay, here's any comments from the public? Anyone from the public want to come up? Okay, seeing no comments, no discussion items from the board.
You know, the governor has appointed our director of legislation. His name is Francisque Marti. He is coming to us by way of New York's local HFA, and his start date is November 29th. So we are very, very happy to be bringing him on board. Yay!
Yes.
So we'll make sure that he is here for our next board meeting so that he can be introduced to all of you.
It's taken part in that process. Very excited about Princess joining. He's an outstanding candidate, and we really look forward to having him on the team.
Yes.
And I got an opportunity to interview him as well, and yeah, couldn't be happier for us, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the feedback we had received was, why did you have to go out of state? And it was, well, we really did get a candidate that has public finance background. He has housing finance agency background and federal legislative experience background. And by far, a lot of it's a fantastic package. And I believe he has a wife that's from Sacramento, which he's bringing his wife home. But he was a complete package. And for seeing where we are at the national level with housing finance reform, and so much of what we're going to be doing is at the national level, that was just invaluable for us to have someone that had that federal and public finance background. So we're very excited about him.
Thank you, Tia. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We stand adjourned.